Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. This is Alex, and I'm joined with the regulars. Molly and Eric and Tolga are here. Brent is also here to tell us. Brent Maynard is going to be talking about the ZWO ASIAIR, and he's going to also talk about the DSLR and imaging with us. So we're going to have a good time talking about all that stuff. And let's see. I do have a calendar that I want to show you, and I got to share my screen to do that. We've had some changes in the calendar of late because we always have changes in the calendar, and we.
Yeah, I'm having a display issue. Sorry, totally on my end. I don't know what's wrong. So give me just a second. Okay, that was weird. Okay, we're back. Go ahead. And Brent, if you could, or never mind. We're good. Go ahead.
Are we live?
Yeah. Yep.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
We were live. The video wasn't. The audio was there, but the video wasn't there. So go ahead and pick up where you left off.
Hi. Obviously, we're coming to you live. This isn't rehearsed. This isn't practiced, and it certainly isn't edited. Anyway, Molly's at the controls today, so she's doing her darndest to keep the Streamlabs working the way it's supposed to be going. Brent Maynard's going to be with us tonight, and he's going to be talking about the he's going to be talking about ASIAIR and for imaging with your DSLR. So we'll be listening to him in a few minutes. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the calendar, and I am sharing my screen. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got him.
Okay. So Brent's here tonight. Next week, Giuseppe was going to be here, but we had to take him out of the mix because, we don't have the show prepared yet. It's one of our turns, Molly's or mine, to come up with a program for next week, and we both have one prepared. So I don't know what exactly is going to happen. Maybe Eric will be here. I don't know. We'll see. But we do have some prepared shows for you, and we'll get that in there. Maybe we'll know which one it is by the end of the program tonight. Maybe we'll have to come back next week and tell you what it is. And then we're going to build another remote observatory, just like we built a couple of weeks ago with Manny. And we're going to talk about transient objects, nightscape photography, and time-lapse, only this time with animations. We've done nightscape photography. One of our earliest shows was on nightscape photography, but we're going to be doing time-lapse animations. 200-panel mosaic coming up the week after that. And if you remember, we had a really good introduction from Isa not too long ago about the electronic assisted astronomy. Well, that's a big thing, and there are lots of ways to do it. And Michael Keefe is going to be joining us to tell us of his version of that kind of stuff coming up on August 23rd. And then remember, we've had several programs of late about how to do science with the astro imaging equipment you already have, because you can be doing more than making pretty pictures with this. Stella Kafka. Isn't that a beautiful name for somebody with, doing star stuff? Stella will be here to talk about the AAVSO's efforts in recruiting amateur astroimagers, light curves, and stuff like that. Haven't figured out September 6th yet. And we thought we were going to take a day off on September 13th, but probably aren't going to be able to take a day off because there's a lot of restrictions on COVID-19. I saw in Cloudy Nights that Bob does not think that the NEAC will be coming off. And from the tone of his message, it looked like, I'll just leave it to NEAP to announce what they're going to be doing. I know that Nightfall, one of the imaging programs that I'm involved with, has had to be canceled for this year. The Board of Trustees of the Riverside Astronomical Society took those actions yesterday at their regular board meeting. So I'm going to have to get out some information to everybody about what the implications of that cancellation is. And it's really unfortunate that all that stuff's happening. Luckily, there is still a place to go that as long as your Norton is up to date and your Windows Defender and all that other stuff is up to date, you're not going to get a virus from this kind of a meeting. So get on over to the website and, oh, got it. And over here, you can see a big chunk, all the 63 of you that are already watching, you can see a big chunk of people are already making comments and all that other stuff. So, hey, Rachel's here. Hi, Rachel. Congratulations on being part of AIC, the real AIC, not TAIC. Rachel, I think, was just named one of the board members for AIC. But that's not why I came over here. I came over here to remind you that we need people to subscribe to the Astro Imaging channel. We've got 9.1, which is up from 50 from last week, and that's good. If you're watching this program, you approve of what we're doing. Closer we can get to 10,000. If we can get over 10,000, the better off we're doing. But type in your conversations over here on the right-hand side. Make your comments. Be part of all this. And remember when we were talking about the calendar over here, see this to be announced? Well, that's a little early to be asking you to volunteer for that. But this one here, September 13th, and when you look for more, I think you're going to find out that they're all empty after that. So we need volunteers, and you're the people that have to volunteer to make this thing work. But enough about this kind of stuff, enough about the management. Brent Maynard is here, and Brent will be talking to us today. Brent, are you about ready to take over?
Sure.
Okay, well, you've got it. Tell the people who you are and what you got to tell us about.
Okay, hello. Thank you for inviting me to present this evening. I met Molly a few years ago at Green Bank in West Virginia at the Green Bank Star Quest. And she reached out to me a few weeks ago and asked me if I would be interested in presenting. So hope I'm able to provide some good information for folks and get some interest in the way that I've done some of my imaging. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So is my screen sharing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Brent Maynard. I live in West Virginia between our two largest cities, Huntington and Charleston, a small little town pronounced Hurricane, but it's really, Hurricane, West Virginia. And I work at Marshall University in the IT department. I'm an IT director, mainly on the administrative side of the house. Do a little bit of teaching occasionally, but my major hobby is doing astrophotography. And this evening I wanted to talk a little bit about the ASIAIR and how it's completely changed my process of doing imaging. So before we get started, what I thought I would do real quick is just show some recent images that I've taken using the ASIAIR as the primary provider of controlling the mount, doing the guiding, doing the image capture, and everything. So let me just jump over to some images real quick. This image is actually not done with the ASIAIR, but I'll get to that here in just a minute. This is the Iris Nebula taken through a C8. These were 5-minute exposures using a focal reducer. This is taken with a 180 millimeter Nikkor telephoto lens. My imaging camera at this point in time was a Canon T5i that I had modified to take out some of the infrared blocking filters. This was M51 taken through the C8 as well. Also some long exposures, and this one has a little bit of a difference. I'm using combined both dual-band filter, SCT dual-band. It's the dual-band O3 and hydrogen alpha filter combined with the standard RGB data. M63. M101, this is a very challenging target. It's more challenging than I thought it would be. I would never have been able to do this without having the ability to guide with my C8. because of the mount that I use. And I'll get into that type of equipment here in a little bit. Another process, the M101, just a little bit different processing using Deep Sky Stacker and or Astro Pixel Processor are my two main tools. This is the whole North American Pelican Nebula area. This was taken at Blackwater Falls last fall. That's another area up in the mountains of West Virginia. Very dark skies there. So if you're looking for dark skies, there's some really good dark sky locations in West Virginia. This was also taken with the duo band filter and the 180 millimeter telephoto lens in a Canon T5i. And this is probably the last image I'll show. This was NGC 4565, and also using the C8 and guiding with the ASIAIR. And I'll get into why that's important here in just a few minutes. Okay, my primary equipment, I use self-modified Canons. Primarily the T5i has been my current camera that I've been using for the past couple of years. Just recently, within the last month, I've acquired a Canon RP, a full frame, and I modified it as well. Canon had a good sell on those, which was surprising. So I got it for a good deal, brand new. But I validated the warranty as soon as I took it apart to get the filter out. Also used the ASI 224 MC for guiding and planetary imaging. My primary lens of choice has always been the 180 millimeter Nikkor lens, the f2.8 with the ED glass. It's an excellent lens. And most of my deep sky images over the past 4 or 5 years have been with the Nikkor lens. For doing Milky Way wide field, very wide field, I use the Tokina. And I just also recently picked up the Sigma 85 lens, and it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of glass. And that first wide field Cygnus image that I showed just a minute ago was taken with the Sigma 85, just 45 minutes worth of data. And so it's a great little lens. And my guide scope is just a cheap Amazon SD Bony guide scope. My mount is a Orion Sirius, and it does a pretty good job, but it just isn't engineered to do long exposure without guiding. And then you can see there my software that I use and the type of power that I use, which is also important for some of my needs and desires. So why ASIAIR? Portability, that's probably the biggest thing. It's portable, it works, it doesn't use a lot of power, it's handy, and I'll get into all the details here in just a few minutes. Where I live right now, it's about 4 to 5 sky conditions, so it's pretty bright. If I want to get to borderline Bortle 1, Bortle 2 skies, it's just a few hours away from my house. Spruce Knob, West Virginia is the darkest place in the state here. And I mentioned Green Bank Observatory as well. There's Blackwater Falls in that same general area. So up in the mountains of West Virginia, there are some really dark sky locations. So if you're on the eastern half of the United States, come to West Virginia and get some dark skies. Having something portable has always been a major thing, and also something that doesn't require a lot of power, where you have to carry a bunch of batteries to some of these locations just don't have power, so you're always running everything off battery. The other major benefit with ASIAIR is the guiding. It's simple and straightforward, and polar alignment. It's amazing how quickly I can get polar alignment done using this little device. Another one is plate solving. It's very quick and easy to, once you get everything lined up and you return to home, then you can either use Sky Safari or the built-in library in ASIAIR to select the target and go to. And if you don't slew to it immediately, you can just take a single image, do a plate solve. It'll ask you, do you want to sync and center the object? And you just say, okay. And it does that, and every single time that I've been using the plate solve GoTo, it puts the target right in the middle of the frame. One thing I did kind of skip here just a second ago when I was talking about equipment is I'll actually show this real quick. The actual equipment that preview is not updating here. Quit. Okay, here we go. So this is the actual equipment that I was talking about earlier in the slides. Shows this is the ASIAIR right there in the middle. It's just a Raspberry Pi and a little plastic case. This is the ASI original. I have been looking to get the new version, the ASIAIR Pro, but it's been on back order for several months. It's starting to become more available, but I'm looking at trying to get that, and I'll explain some of the differences between the original and the Pro in a little bit. As I mentioned, it's just a Raspberry Pi with the software. So the cost of the unit is, you buy the Pi, 32 gig memory card comes with it, with the original, and then the software, the ASIAIR software. This is my typical C8 setup with the guide scope and the Canon DSLR on the end there. This is also one of my primary, probably I would say 60 to 70% of the time, I would be using the Nikkor 180 millimeter lens doing wide field. And then when I wanted to go for some deep, galaxy work, then I would pull the C8 out to do that. Just a picture of the guide scope. The other thing I mentioned earlier was power. With the new technology with power, the lithium iron phosphate technology is amazing. This little unit I picked up on Amazon, I'll show the name here in just a minute. I can run my mount and the ASIAIR and the guide scope for 2 nights before I have to actually recharge this unit. And it's very small. You can see it sitting on top of a brick, so you can see the physical size of it. It doesn't weigh very much. The lithium ion technology is very light compared to the old lead gel cell type batteries or the marine batteries if you were doing the deep cycle type batteries. This is the name Bowden's. Picked this up on Amazon a few years ago. It's been working well. Just this past week, I visited a friend who started up a new astronomy shop, and he had this in stock, and I picked it up. Haven't had a chance to actually use it yet, but the nice thing about this unit is it has USB-C outputs on it, as well as USB 3, which gives you the higher amperage to drive your devices that need more current at 5 volts, and then the standard USB type, 5 volt outputs, as well as AC. So with these 2 units, I could run probably for 4 nights easily without having to actually recharge. I typically don't run any type of dew protection on power. I usually just use hand warmers. I just get some hand warmers and get some painter's tape and just kind of tape them to the outside of the lens, and that seems to work pretty well. One thing that I mentioned to Molly a couple years ago when we first met is I try to do things not necessarily on a budget, but I like to try to think outside of the box and kind of hack around a little bit and try to get things to work. And so I've been looking at this, what's the lowest power need that I can have, and one way to preserve power is just use hand warmers. Okay, to interact with the ASIAIR, the Raspberry Pi, use a tablet or a smartphone, and you can use Android or iOS for either one of those. And I've never tried it, but I think there's also an Android plugin that works. If you have a laptop or a Chromebook and you want to access from that device, you can interact with the ASIAIR with a laptop or a Chromebook as well. So what we're going to start doing now is just, instead of trying to do a live demo, which is typically fraught with problems, as most live demos go, I did some screenshots to show how the interface works. And so I'll just be talking about these individual screenshots as we go along. The first thing that you want to do after you power on the ASIAIR is look for the hotspot that it's going to pop up on your Wi-Fi. So in this case, you can see that I've attached to the ASIAIR, then underscore, and then some hexadecimal number that uniquely identifies that particular ASIAIR, which is probably just its MAC address. And once you connect to that, then you can launch the ASIAIR app either on your Android or iOS device, and you connect up to the ASIAIR. And this is a typical looking main display. I will be talking about these items, and if anybody wants any, has questions as we move along, and there's the time periods for the question answer, I will answer, the best of my ability what some of these functions are. Won't have time to go through every single one of these things, but I'm gonna hit the highlights of what's going on this particular display. So at the top set of icons, you have your network settings. Right beside that, the camera is your main camera. That's your main imaging device. The one beside that, which looks like a little bullseye, is your guiding settings, your guide camera. Then your mount and telescope settings. There's two that you can't see because it's not the best image that I used on this particular screenshot, but there's a filter wheel accessory that you can drive off the ASIAIR. I do not have that. And there's also a focus, electronic focuser that you can hook up to the ASIAIR. And those are grayed out since I don't have those hooked up on my setup. The last icon, the little SD card icon, is where you go review your storage, and you can actually review and pull up your files, delete files that are being stored on the SD card on the Raspberry Pi. On the left side, if you start going down, you see the histogram, the guide settings, plate solve, and the crosshairs, and I'll get into those a little bit, and some of the other things as well. This is just an image of probably, I don't know if this is Vega or just a bright star with a batten-off mask, so you can see the diffraction spikes. Probably one of the best things that was invented for the astrophotography hobby is the batten-off mask. If you don't have one, get one. You can reach focus, perfect focus, in just a matter of minutes using that device. So I highly recommend the batten-off mask if you do not have one. So I'm just going to kind of go across the top, those top icons, and see what the functionality is here. So the Wi-Fi settings or the network settings, and it shows you the hotspot name. You can pick the frequency that you want to use, either 2.4 gigahertz or the 5 gigahertz bands. 2.4 is what I usually do, just so I can bring my iPad or my iPhone back into the house and watch what's going on over Wi-Fi. 5 gig tends to not make it through the walls, so it's much shorter distance with the 5 gig band. The bottom setting, the Wi-Fi station mode, allows you to connect the ASIAIR up to your home network. I've not tried that yet, but I've read out online there's a Facebook group for the ASIAIR users, and people use that quite frequently. You can hook either a wired connection into your ASIAIR, or you can use it just connecting up to your Wi-Fi from your house. So that gets used a lot by other folks. I just never have tried that yet. Also, as part of the network settings, you can see the wired connection settings, the CPU temperature, and the under voltage warning. One thing about this device, it does run off 5 volts because it's a Raspberry Pi, but it really needs the current. So if you are providing it 5 volts, but you're not giving it a good 2.5 amps worth of power, it will start throwing this under voltage warning. Once I got the lithium iron phosphate power packs that have the USB 3 output, I've not had any issues at all with the under voltage warning. The next icon across was the main camera settings, and in this screenshot you can see that at this point in time I was using the T3i, which was the 600D, Canon 600D, and the last time I used this, it was hooked up to my C8 with a focal reducer, and it calculated the focal length to be 1172 millimeters. If you don't know what the imaging focal length is of your setup, well, if you put focal reducers on, or you've got something in there and that's changing that, all you need to do is just put 0 in there, and the ASIAIR will calculate what your focal length is for you. And you need to know what that is to do plate solving. It gives you the ISO settings, just the typical settings on your main camera. These are the main camera settings continued. And now, since I do DSLR imaging primarily for all my deep sky, wide field imaging, or galaxy imaging, I have it set up to store both the images on the ASIAIR SD card as well as in camera. So I have 2 copies. The image that gets saved out on the ASIAIR is in FITS format, and then on the Canon, it's saved as the standard Canon RAW format. The next setting is guiding, and we'll go into some of the guiding settings. You pick your guide camera, and in this case, you can see I'm using the ASI 224 MC. My guide scope is 240 millimeters. Lets you play with the gain a little bit. So depending on where you're pointing your guide scope, if there's not any bright stars, real bright stars, you might need to tweak the gain a little bit. If you have a nice bright star in the field of view, then you pull your gain back down so it's not overpowering the guide software with a huge star. You've got some basic settings. I just take the defaults here. I really haven't tweaked these much. It seems to do a pretty good job on guiding with the defaults. The one thing that I do set up is dithering. And you can set up the ASIAIR to dither. How far do you want it to move? It's going to just randomly start moving that around after, and it kind of got clipped off the bottom, but I set it 4 intervals. So after 4 images, it will dither. It will randomly slew the scope in some direction to try to even out. DSLRs are not astro imaging quality. Well, they are, but they're not professional grade astro imaging sensors. So you got some imperfections on the sensor and imperfections in your optical trains, different things like that. And the dithering helps smooth that out some. So these are the dithering settings. And we'll back up just a little bit, go back to the actual guiding. And this was a typical guiding of an evening, and guiding with my moderate, middle medium quality mount, the Orion Sirius. I get some pretty decent guiding throughout an evening, as long as my seeing's not too bad. If I have to fight anything here, it's the seeing. The jet stream is always, not always, but about 80% of the time, the jet stream is overhead here. So we're always fighting seeing conditions, especially in the winter time. Summertime, we can get some nice, steady, stable air, but most of the time we have nice twinkling stars all the time. Now we're off into the actual telescope and mount settings. I have mine set up with EQ Mod and Sky Safari. So I remove the hand controller from my mount and plug the ASIAIR directly into the mount. So there's an option to where you can actually plug the ASIAIR into the SynScan handset for the Orion telescope, but I completely bypass that. And I just plug the ASIAIR directly into the mount. And then, since I'm using Sky Safari as well, I pick the EQ Mod with Sky Safari option. And as I mentioned earlier, the Sky Safari ASIAIR integration works really well. And so you've got the power of Sky Safari, planetarium type software driving the ASIAIR as well. And it picks up all the information from your phone or your smart device. So, it pulled my lat long. So if anybody wants to know where I'm sitting right now, they can plug those into Google Earth and probably hit my driveway, which is where I usually image. And then you can it automatically will sync that. But if for some reason you want to make sure, you can just click the sync to mount button, and it will push that information from your smart device out to the ASIAIR. Some more mount settings. What's our guiding rate? Like I said, I just keep the default on this. Tracking, of course, and then the tracking rates for sidereal, solar, or lunar. Okay, the next icon down is the storage settings, and as I mentioned before, if you look right in the middle of the screen there, the little green SD card icons highlighted. Right above that is the electronic focuser, and above that is the filter wheel, and I don't have those, so that's why I don't have any settings or set of information on those. So you can go to the storage settings, and then you can go into image management, and it'll start presenting you your preview of or data that you've stored, images you stored on the device. And so you can just kind of drill into it, and I pulled up a particular image. So this is a single image of M101 from that M101 series of image that I showed earlier. Over the course of about 4 nights, I captured almost 7 hours worth of data that I threw into that whole process. Standard just RGB data, as well as some of the narrowband imaging with that SCT duo filter to try to pull out some of the hydrogen alpha pieces in M101. Okay, so that's just kind of the basic setup. How to get things running, make sure all the settings are set up. You've got your camera identified. You've got your mount. It's connected. It's synchronized with your mount. If you're doing guiding, you've got all that set up. And now you're ready to actually start doing something once you get things set up. So what we have here are the different modes of operation that I want to go through. There is the focus, the polar alignment, preview, and Autorun. And I will be skipping the focus because I don't have that.
Brent, can you take a couple of questions before you get into that?
Oh, yeah.
People are interested in the battery. Can you run everything off those light batteries? And someone want to know how much that costs.
So the Bowdens, the BEAUDENS one, and I can make this presentation available to the TAIC for publishing, or however you want to get this information to people. I got that on Amazon. It was about $130. Before that, I would use the standard jump start batteries that you would get at Walmart or auto parts store to jump a car to provide power for my mount, and they work fine for a little while, but then they tend to discharge pretty quick. But then they after a while they are hard to charge. They won't hold a charge very long. Those gel cell batteries, I don't know if they develop a memory or what, they just get weak. These lithium iron phosphate battery technology, you're supposed to get 90+% reliability of being able to charge, full capacity with 2,000 recharges, 2,000 recharge cycles is what is specified in the specifications. So this thing should last me for several years to be able to charge and discharge. And I do run the mount, the camera, and the ASIAIR off that one unit. And I've run that for 2 nights, all night, and not had to recharge between nights. So it does have a good capacity. I think that one's about 144 watt hours. The new one that I just picked up, which I haven't tried yet, the Mead, I think it's like 222 watt hours. So it's actually a bigger capacity than that other one that I was using.
And there was some discussion about using Indy, not ASCOM.
They support Indy. I don't know much. I mean, I use ASCOM. That's just how I'm set up, because I built my own little ASCOM cable, the serial EQ mod cable. Those are pretty easy to build yourself. But I think they do support Indy, all the Indy devices.
And I guess the other question is what cameras are supported. there was some discussion about only ZWO.
So I can actually jump into that real quick here. Let me slide over here. So these are the currently supported DSLRs from Canon and Nikon. There's always requests for Sony. I don't think they put any type of Sony support in here at all yet. There's also some requests to add some of the newer Canons and Nikons to the list, which they have not done yet. And there's a lot of discussion over on the ASIAIR Facebook page about why they have and why they have not put DSLRs out there for support. And I can understand they're trying to sell their own cameras. Why would they want to, get into their sales for providing DSLR support? But this is the current one. I'm hopeful that they'll do the Canon R series soon. And I'm actually even looking at buying a cooled ASIAIR camera. So it's not that I don't know. It's an interesting discussion that goes on about which cameras that they support or don't support yet. But this is the current list of DSLRs that they support, and this is the current list of ASIAIR cameras that they support the ASI cameras that are supported with ASIAIR.
So I think that's all I have right now. So continue
Okay.
on.
So the modes of operation. So we're back to this preview. And on this screen, you can see on the right, it tells you we're in preview mode. If your camera supports binning, you can set the binning level that you want to do. And then you can take an image, which is the little shutter button release there on the right center or right side, right in the middle of the image. And then this is where you are when you want to do plate solving. If you're just getting things, you're working on your focus. Like in this particular case, I would take an image of a bright star with my Batinoff mask on. Then I can preview it on my iPad or my iPhone, and then do whatever tweaking I would need to do. At this point in time, if you're in preview mode, it's not saving the images. It's not saving the image to your camera, and it's not saving the image to your SD card on the ASIAIR. So just be aware of that. I think with the new version, they may have enabled that to actually save preview images that you're taking. So these are kind of like throwaway images on the preview if you don't have that slider set to save. So the first thing that you would typically do on the evening is work on your polar alignment. So you click when you click on the preview button or whatever the current mode is, if you just tap that with your finger, it pops up this little menu. You see focus, PA, preview, and Autorun. So to get into polar alignment, you just tap on PA. So it puts you in polar alignment mode. And it's basically just a 3-step process. You generally get your mount pointing north. I've actually just gone out there and kind of eyeballed it without looking through my polar scope, and just to see, okay, I'm pretty close to pointing to Polaris. And sometimes I'll look through the polar scope to make sure that I'm not way off, especially if I'm at a new location where I know that it might not be quite level and I have to adjust the tripod legs. But just point it generally north, and you just click go, and it'll take a 5-second or 10-second exposure, whatever you set it to, and it will do a plate solve, and then it will rotate your mount 60 degrees and take another image and plate solve that one, then goes off and does its plate solving magic and tells you which way that you need to adjust your mount. And this is the best that I've been able to ever get. I'm never inside the 4 arc-second circle ever. This was just a lucky night. My mount tolerances on the threads on the screws for doing the azimuth adjustments or the declination adjustments on my mount are so coarse and so crude to some extent. I can sit there I can bounce back and forth just by barely tightening or loosening one of those adjustment screws, because It's just the engineering on those is just not, the tolerance is just not that great. So if I get anything close to where I get the little smiley face, then I'm good, and I'll start my imaging process from there. So after I get the polar alignment done, I get the smiley face, and I can typically do this in about 2 or 3 minutes. After a little bit of practice, it gets pretty easy. You know how far you have to adjust the knobs. You get used to your mount and whatever quirks that your mount might have in adjustment. So once you get that under control, you can usually get polar alignment, and I get polar alignment in 2 to 3 minutes every time. And then I'll go into doing some type of GoTo operation. Before we get into the Autorun, what I would do is I would take, just tell the mount to go back home. That's a setting in the telescope. You just say go home, and it'll return the mount back to the home position. And then I can pick a target either using the library that's built into the ASI, or I can use Sky Safari to pick a target and then just do a GoTo. I haven't done any type of star alignment. All I've done is the polar alignment. So I haven't done any star alignment or anything yet. I just say GoTo. And it's, at this point, I've never had the image in my field of view. Unless I'm using a wide field lens, and I might be able to get part of it, but it's not centered typically. But then I just click on the plate solve button, and it'll plate solve, and it throws up a little dialog box that says sync and go to your target. It'll say sync and go to M101, or sync and go to M50, M51. Or if you actually put in right ascension and declination coordinates, it will tell you, do you want to go to those coordinates that you input manually? And you just click OK, and it will slew to those coordinates after the plate solve. And basically, every single time I've ever done that, it centers the target right in the center of field of my imaging device. So the plate solving and GoTo sync works very well with this device. Once you get things set up and you're ready to actually start taking images, you go into the Autorun option. This is where you set up your sequence. And on this screen, you can see that you can actually have the guide graph showing how well your guiding is, what kind of RMS error you might be experiencing on your guiding. So you can enable that or disable that in this view. And it shows that I have 0 of 40 images taken for this particular sequence. And then what we'll do is we'll go into the Autorun settings, and you can create a new sequence once you're in the Autorun section. What the length of the exposure, if you want to do any type of binning, all the basic stuff, whether you're doing light, bias, flat, or dark frames, and you click OK. And then you create your shooting schedule. And in this particular case, I've got 2 schedules set up, one with 180-second subframes, and then one with 300-second subframes. And then I could add a third one if I want to. And I think, and I haven't tried this, I need to look at the latest update and see what new features they've added. But there's one thing that they've been talking about is having multiple targets. So I could set up, if I want to do like a mosaic. So I want to shoot, 30 images of this panel. I want to shoot 30 images of the next panel and 30 images of the next panel. And so I can create my my 2x2 panel or whatever panel you're working on. Just go ahead and get that all set up in ASIAIR, and then click go, and it'll take care of doing that for you. I don't know if that's available yet, or they're still working on that, but I think that's a feature request that's out there all the time, is being able to have multiple targets set up. Something right now, what I've actually used before is doing the Orion Nebula, which you need some long exposures to get the subtle details, but you also need some very short exposures to try to capture the trapezium area. And so you can set up your 2 or 3 sets of images to take some 1-minute subs, some 30-second subs, some 10-second subs, and then later on you can post-process those into your final image. And once you get everything set up, you just click the start button or the take image button, a little round circle to the right, and it will start its process. And you can see that dithering is on. So in this case, after 4 images, at least the way I have mine set up, it will dither a little bit and then start the image taking it from there. So that's the Autorun feature of the ASIAIR. I mentioned earlier that there's also a library. So this is what's built into the ASIAIR. You can look at tonight's best. You can also just search on NGC, Messier numbers, name stars, the typical things you would search for. Their catalog is not huge, but it's pretty good. And but with the Sky Safari integration, you can get to just about anything you want to, especially with the Sky Safari. You can just just like a typical planetarium. Oh, this looks like an interesting part of the sky. I don't know what this is. You just tap and say GoTo, and it'll take over and get you in that on that target. So this is where I kind of jumped over there just a minute ago on the specs and the supported cameras. So let's jump back into the specs. I kind of went over that a little bit. I skipped over that. So there are 2 versions. I have the 1st gen, the old version. It's a Raspberry Pi 3 and has 1 gig of memory. And you can see all the speeds and feeds. What's important on this is it's all USB 2. And the ASIAIR Pro is the new Raspberry Pi 4. It's a 4 gig version, and it supports USB 3 and 2, but it also has built-in power support. So you can feed it 12 volts at up to 6 amps, and then it can output 4 12-volt outputs to drive whatever hardware you might need. So you can drive your mount off this. You can drive cameras, whatever needs 12 volts, or even if you run that through a regulator to step it down to something that doesn't need 12 volts, you can do that through this. So you'd have 1 power cord going up to your ASIAIR, and all the other do strips or whatever you might be running can all be run through that Pro. The original doesn't have anything like that, so that's one of the newer features. The other thing that there's the negative of the Pro is it's in a steel case or aluminum case. I think it's aluminum case, so it really dampens down the Wi-Fi signal. So there's lots of complaints on the Wi-Fi connectivity, especially if you're trying to connect to your home network, or if you get too far away from it, if you're not in the station mode, but you're just connecting up to the ASI hotspot. The distance is really hindered, but there's people that have come up with some interesting workarounds. They get these little TCP or the T-Link, I think it's T-Link, little access points that they actually tape onto the back of that and power it off of the ASIAIR and kind of make their own little hotspot with the TP-Link type device. So there's people have worked around. There's, as always, there's people re-engineering how things are to suit their needs. So, but the one big drawback of the ASIAIR Pro that I've heard about is because of the metal case, it really dampens the Wi-Fi coverage if you're getting too far away from it. So, one of the driving things that took me to the ASIAIR and then tried out, I mentioned, a friend of mine who's an excellent astro imager. His name's Jeff Ball. He got it first, and he's just loves it and said it's a game changer for him. It's all about portability. How fast can you pick up your equipment and go to a dark sky location and get set up that doesn't have to require huge amounts of power, lugging around, a laptop, and you're worrying about the laptop and all that kind of stuff. With this, it's just basically a Raspberry Pi with software loaded on it. modestly sized battery, lots of capacity, but it's not very heavy. It's pretty light, and it's pretty portable. It's pretty easy to use, and you don't have to worry about power. The other thing that was a driving decision for me is being able to guide. I played around for years using webcams and using EQ mod to try to do guiding, and it was just always seemed to be something wrong with the laptop. For whatever reason, it was more struggle than it was worth. Than I wanted to get into it, especially when I'm trying to get out in the field and trying to be portable. With this, like I mentioned, I can set up guiding. It's pretty easy and quick. Now I can guide my equipment to 5 and even 10-minute exposures, and it's not high end by any stretch of the imagination. The Orion Sirius is kind of a mid-range type of mount, but I've been able to get some good quality subs of 5 minutes, and where I've been using that SCT dual band filter, the narrow band filter, you really need about 5 minutes at a minimum to get a good enough signal through to get so 5-minute images now are not a problem, even with the C8. I could have never done that before with just too much periodic error and stuff in the Sirius mount to be able to move that C8 around with all that mass. So but with guiding, it's pretty straightforward and simple. So that's kind of what I had to present, but I'm ready for any other questions that might have been asked.
Brent, there seems to be a lot of interest in the device and a lot of discussion over on YouTube about users. So I think you have a lot of company and people that like this device. I don't see any additional questions. Alex, do you see anything?
Yes, I have one of my own that I would like to ask. And I'm sorry if you've covered this and I somehow missed it, but many of us use Voyager, Sequence Generator Pro, Nina, and I know in a lot of other session managers, you can specify several different targets that you want to cover in a given night. And is that possible with the software that's in here?
That's one thing I mentioned earlier I need to check on. I think that's one of the feature requests, and I don't know if it's in the latest release or not, to be able to set up multiple targets. So you can just, I want to do these 3 targets. You start at 10 p.m., and do X number of exposures, and then go to the next target, and so forth. But I think that's a feature request. I don't know if it's out in the software yet or not.
How about temperature compensation and focuser? Do you know about that?
I don't know, but I do know with the Pro that some of the things that they're adding to the focus features, just for what I've read over on the Facebook group, is the ability to do live focusing and refocusing. So I don't have an electronic focuser, so I haven't really dived deep into that functionality. But I think that's another feature request. If it's not there yet, to be able to midstream, check the focus. If it's out of focus, tweak the focus, and then continue the Autorun image capture.
Okay. Did the Pro replace the original version, or
yes,
can you still get both?
I think you can still get both.
Okay. So,
but I don't know that, but I think you can still get both.
Can tell me about software updating. This is a piece of software. Once I bought it, is that the piece of software I've got it in all its life, or
no? So actually, this today, when I was doing some prep for this, I launched the ASIAIR app on my iPhone, and I connected it up to the ASIAIR, and it says there's an update available. And what it does, it will download it from when you update when the ASIAIR updates on your smart device, it pulls down the image file with it for the ASIAIR. So the next time you connect up to it, it says, do you want to update? And so I actually updated this evening or earlier today to version 5 dot something. So it does that automatically.
Okay. Um, Thank you very much. Those were my questions. I see James and a couple other people are asking about the price of one of these suckers.
So the original, the version one,
By the way, Brent, if you stop sharing your screen, you can talk to us full screen
okay.
kind of thing. But go ahead and do that.
So the ASI, the original one was, I think it was about $179. And I think the Pro is a bit pricier because it's got the built-in power support to be able to drive other, it's got the power regulator to be able to handle 12 volts and feed 12 volts out to other things. It's in the upper twos, maybe low threes, depending on where you get it, I think, for the ASIAIR.
Okay, so somebody mentioned over there that it was James mentioned it about $300 and 4 to 6 week delivery time.
Yeah, it's getting better. It was months before, so the delivery actually is getting better. So I'm hoping to get my Pro before too long. For the for me, the $179 is worth it just for the ability to do the plate solving, the polar alignment, and the guiding. Those three things right there, and just a small device, and I can use my phone or my iPad, and not have to worry about taking a laptop or more power out into the field when I go.
Of course. Okay, folks, get all your questions in. We need the questions over there. And we're getting ready to wrap up here. Is there anything else you wanted to talk to us about, Brent?
I can't think of anything other than just, be willing to take chances. I've always been kind of a hacker around on things. I started back in the day with the 2U cam webcam to modify it to do long exposures, so I could try to do some stuff back back then. So the new cameras, the Canon RP, if you're interested in doing a modification, that's the easiest one I've ever modified to take the filter out, which is surprising since it's a full frame. It's significantly easier to modify than the Rebel series, the TXI type series of cameras. So
thank you.
So there's don't be be willing to take chances, I guess. The motto.
So there's some late questions coming in. Does the TP link work well with the Pro?
From what I've read on Facebook, that seems to be the preferred solution. They just kind of Velcro it to the back of the Pro and make a little hotspot there and wire it straight into the Ethernet port, so that it gives them much more distance on their Wi-Fi to be able to reach into the home.
Okay. Hey, a couple people have mentioned that they've taken a different route to do the same kind of thing. Remember, what you're buying here is a computer with perhaps power switches and USB interfaces for your equipment. Richard Wright had a $1,500 version of this with the Sky Fusion about a month ago. And what's the other product? The Eagle. You mount them up on top of your scope, etc. And for another, you're basically buying a computer with all the wires and everything inside and cleaned up. And Tim, I think it was, is it Tim? Said that he just decided to go with the mini computer. That's what I decided to do, is just go with the mini computer. And the price I pay is I've got more wires, but I've got a full Windows computer in there, and I can use PixInsight in there if I wanted to. So Tim, for instance, you know how I'm always sitting here saying, contact us on the astroimaging channel.org at the contact, give us your name. 6 weeks from now, you can be presenting on this. I appreciate Brent putting on his presentation. He basically busted out his PowerPoint and his file of slides of his pictures and stuff, and just visited with us. And that's what we are after in the Astroimaging channel. So I encourage you that anybody who's built himself his own solution, like, what did you use for your wireless interface? What did you use for your mini computer? What did you use? If you've done your own kind of thing like this, tell us about it. Make a show out of it for the Astro Imaging channel. And if you've got some other project you've done, that's the makings of the Astro Imaging channel, and we'd really appreciate it if you could present it to your buddies out here on the Astro Imaging channel. Eric, have you been watching? Are there any new questions we need to get into?
No, I think we're all set. There are lots of comments about what a great presentation, and I'm sure it's always nice to hear, Brent. So
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Well, thanks to everyone, and thanks for
Okay.
inviting me to present.
Okay. I just always want to leave with a little bit of a, don't forget to like. Okay, put down a like that you like the show. What do we got? 62 watching now, 63 watching now. Yeah, so go ahead that you like the show, and subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed, so that you can get notices that this is going to continue to happen. And thank you very much for presenting. And Toga, or no, it's not Toga, it's Molly controlling us tonight. Kind of controlling us tonight, as much as we can be controlled. Molly, you ready to take us out?
Yeah, let me go ahead and hit the button.
Okay.